We talk a lot on this channel about digestive issues and digestion, and so I kind of wanted to go over a connection between duodenal dysbiosis, low stomach acid, and SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And this is the duodenum here. It's basically like the first 10 inches of the small intestine. A lot of people will say duodenum, but trust me, it's a lot more fun to say duodenum. And I kind of view this as one of the most important aspects of this whole digestive system. So I found this great study here on the potential role of hypochlorhydria in the development of duodenal dysbiosis. And it's okay if I'm standing in front of these. I'll put the links to these studies that we reference in the description below if you want to dig into these a little bit more. But this study looked at the situation of looking at hypochlorhydria, which is basically low stomach acid. We really need stomach acid here in the stomach to acidify our food so that we can break that food down and get the nutrients out of that food. So a lack of stomach acid for any reason is called hypochlorhydria. So in this study, they wanted to look at what are the effects of low stomach acid on this duodenal area and the microbiome that exists there. And there had been other studies that had shown issues with like PPI use, and they were kind of like, well, we don't want to do that. We know that there's a lot of studies that show that PPI use can create some dysbiosis in this intestinal tract, so we don't want to do that. We just want to look at the pH. Nobody's actually looked at the pH of the stomach to see what the differences would be there. So they were looking at people with like atrophic gastritis, which is a situation that can really kind of deteriorate the lining of that stomach and restrict those cells from producing stomach acid, and other people that just were not naturally making enough stomach acid, and then seeing how does this affect this situation. So they also looked at stool samples. When they saw dysbiosis here in the duodenum, they also look at stool samples and say, oh wow, we're really seeing these same pathogenic microbes in the stool that are existing in here. So what they said was, as a result, the presence of duodenal dysbiosis may lead to the development of pathological conditions of the gastrointestinal tract. For example, the presence of microbiota dysbiosis as well as increased microbial load were correlated to SIBO, a condition associated with numerous gastrointestinal disorders, mainly weight loss, diarrhea, bloating, and malabsorption. And we've talked in a lot of other videos about some of these studies with PPI use indicating SIBO. And what we need to understand is just this acid function. It's not just about breaking down our food. This stomach acid is the barrier to the whole digestive tract. So when bacteria and varmints come in on the food that we're eating, and that's happening, we can't really get away with that. I'll put some links to some studies that indicate this below as well. But when they come in, they're supposed to die in an acid bath. So if someone doesn't have enough stomach acid to kill off all these bad microbes coming in, then why wouldn't they come in here and set up camp in the duodenum? And if that was the case, do you think that they're afraid to go further down the system? No, they're going to go down there, and it has the ability to lead to this SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, that we know can create a whole lot of trouble. We've also talked in some other videos about gastritis, about how a lot of people feel like the mucus barrier in that stomach, that there really needs to be stomach acid present to produce that mucus barrier. Otherwise, why would the body make this barrier to protect from stomach acid if there wasn't any stomach acid there? So when that mucus barrier isn't there, now all of a sudden all these microbial bad guys are creating all this inflammation in the stomach and even ulcers and such. And you know, one thing that this study found that was interesting is when they said that there was low stomach acid, that there was not only just this heavier load of microbes, but a wider variety of them, unless there was like an H. pylori infection. And then H. pylori like took over the neighborhood and like, we're running this town, and then they saw more predominantly like an H. pylori infection. And we know now that that's usually what's creating these issues like ulcers. Ulcers are not from too much stomach acid like we believed in the 80s. So it makes sense that this is kind of being seen together. But another thing that we want to think about when we're looking at this duodenum area is we need to understand the bile function. So a lot of people feel like this stomach acid is there to wipe out the bad guys, but there are some microbes that do well in an acid environment. And so some people feel like it's the alkaline bile that gets squirted down from the gallbladder. It's supposed to come down here and help us emulsify our dietary fats and, access fat-soluble vitamins like A, E, D, and K and all those kind of things. But this alkaline bile also helps to neutralize these acids, and all these functions help this bicarb come out from the pancreas that helps neutralize those acids. So some people feel like it's these opposite pHs kind of colliding, the acid and these alkaline substances, that kill off some of the bad guys that do okay in an acidic environment. So what's interesting is here in the duodenum, these things are actually triggered by a hormone called cholecystokinin. That's what tells the gallbladder to squirt the bile down. It's what tells the pancreas to squirt out the bicarb and enzymes and stuff like that. But cholecystokinin is triggered by stomach acid. So if there's not enough stomach acid, yeah, they're not frying the bad guys. So it makes sense that this study saw more dysbiosis in the duodenum. But since there's not acid coming down to trigger the cholecystokinin, then the bile is not getting dropped down either and killing off the rest of those microbes. So it might be more than just the lack of stomach acid. The lack of stomach acid could be creating other things. And that's why I view this area as so important, because this acid coming in here triggers all of these other things that are really important for us to be able to digest our food correctly and to keep all the bad guys from coming down here and creating these SIBO issues. So this cholecystokinin is very important for that. So it appears that when there is a low stomach acid issue, it could be really important to correct that. Now, if somebody has like ulcers or gastritis here, or maybe even ulcers in the duodenum, some type of duodenal ulcer, which is common because these bad guys come down here and they can create the inflammation and create ulcers there as well. But if somebody has ulcers or gastritis, they can't, just put stomach acid in there, and, supplements that we use like betaine HCl, or maybe some people use some apple cider vinegar. But if you try to acidify, that's going to create a lot of pain and discomfort. So a person might need to take steps to remove that inflammation or ulcers. And I'll put a link below for this study on rapid healing of peptic ulcers in patients receiving fresh cabbage juice. And I don't want you to look at this like a woo-woo thing like, oh, cabbage juice is magic, it's natural, yay. There's actually nutrients in cabbage juice like vitamin U and S-methylmethionine sulfonium that really seem to have the ability to help these things heal better. So this study, we even went on to say like the average crater healing time for the patients who had duodenal ulcers was only 10.4 days, while most other methods that people use is like 37 days. And for ulcers in the stomach, it was like 7.3 days was the average healing time. So this appears to be a very effective way to correct any inflammation going on before somebody tries to improve a low stomach acid if there's inflammation in there. So if you're dealing with those type of things, that might be important to look into before you kind of try to improve a low stomach acid issue. But this original study that we looked at, their conclusion was our results suggest a low acid gastric environment as a contributive factor for duodenal dysbiosis, opening the way to further research investigating intriguing interplay between hypochlorhydria and microbiota in the development of the pathological conditions in the gastrointestinal tract. So they're saying here that we really need to have this acid here so that we can keep all these bad guys from going down and creating all this trouble in the intestinal tract. And just keep in mind that I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving anybody medical advice here. I'm just a professional stand-up comic turned nutrition author, because when I lost my voice for 8 years and 23 different doctors couldn't help me figure that out, I had to dig for my own answers. And now I teach what I learned in books and courses and such. But if someone's having, a lot of these SIBO type issues and these other digestive malfunctions, what's important to understand is that a person has the ability to improve those scenarios in most cases. So we have another video about using cabbage juice to reduce that inflammation. If that's an issue for you, we'll put a link to that cabbage juice video in the description below. And if you're dealing with a variety of digestive symptoms, we'll also put a link to our totally free digestion course that kind of walks you through figuring out, is stomach acid low or are there bowel flow issues and what needs to be corrected and steps you can take to correct that. But if you're not sure if you're dealing with low stomach acid or not, you can jump over right now and check out our video on 10 signs of low stomach acid. And if you already know your stomach acid is low, you can check out our video on 4 steps to improve low stomach acid. I can't wait to hear about your results.